know you heard me on the radio, flexing. She loved the sound of my voice, it's the best thing. Daydreaming of the jazz all day. Pick up the phone late night with Larry K. I know you heard me on the radio, flexing. She loved the sound of my voice, it's the best thing. Daydreaming of the jazz all day. Pick up the phone late night with Larry K.
Rutgers Nation, Scarlet Knights fans, I hope you're thirsty for more Rutgers content. I know I go through my podcast every morning while I'm getting dressed, while I'm getting my coffee, driving out to work. I want to listen to some kind of content from somebody about something. So Night Watch is back, your host, Larry K., to once again give you some RU content. We're in the dog days of summer. If you haven't done so yet, make sure we are in the College Huddle Network. You check out the OHIO podcast with Buckeye Boggs, my dude. I was just on there recently talking Rutgers, the upcoming season, some of the roster changes, some of the things we can expect, our level of optimism or pessimism or whatever in the RU fan base. So make sure you check that out. If you're listening to us on the audio podcast, come on over to YouTube, check out the video version, and click subscribe. If you're watching on YouTube, click that subscribe button. Go check us out on the audio podcast on every major platform. And remember, you could become a sponsor, and there are perks and things coming by clicking the join button. Support Night Watch. It's greatly appreciated. We also got a thanks the other day, a super thanks from somebody throwing some money to support the program. We appreciate that. So thank you. And thank you to all the new subscribers. But enough with the promo and the business and all of that. We are going to be talking business today. Rutgers still knee-deep in this AD search, which last time we talked about how happy I was with the president hire for sports. We thought we'd have an AD by now. We don't have an AD yet. It's kind of interesting. Steve Politi of NJ.com, the Star Ledger, reporting Rutgers swung and missed on Brian LaFemina. There were a lot of rumors about him. There were a lot of rumors that Rutgers was going to go in that type of direction. So here to talk with me, as we've done so frequently as of recent, and as you guys, judging by the listens and the comments, have enjoyed, my colleague David Anderson is back with us to discuss these things. Dave, I would ask you how you were doing, but we already did the pleasantries behind the scenes. I think RU fans are curious about your feelings on this AD situation. So we appoint another interim AD, which was not expected. There were reports now from Steve Politi that we swung and missed on our primary candidate, a Rutgers alum, a sports executive. It's kind of a vague understanding I have of his background in professional sports, but he has some. We strike out. I don't know why. Don't know why he withdrew his name. We're back to interim. What say you about this situation?
Well, I'll try not to be considered off the rails like Aaron Brightman was on the Scarred Faithful when I saw a poster on one of the message board write that the other day, and I got a good chuckle. In short, I mean, yes, I am concerned that it has taken this long, and I understand why, right? But just because, whether you're in business, just in life in general, just because my wife understands why I gave my kids a bunch of junk and didn't feed them dinner, and I can explain, okay, well, this led to this, led to this, led to this, led to this, that doesn't mean it's generally an acceptable state of affairs, right? And so, yeah, the chain reaction is how we got here, obviously. But I just, I am biggest question, and this maybe I'll just pick back to you real quick, is do you think that this was something, let's say, owned by Board of Governors, and now that you have a new school president, that now he's where the buck stops? Like, are we just dealing with a shift that was either on purpose or just kind of happened because that's where we are? And if so, are you more confident if there's a single university president that is basically in charge of overseeing this, or does that somehow make it worse? I mean, I guess, what's your read on the situation there?
I honestly initially would have told you that it wasn't something huge to worry about, because perhaps when the new president came in and they had conversations and they had identified a certain amount of candidates, and maybe he brought some experience from LSU, or he brought some other caveats into it, or, some other perspective, it caused them to say, look, let's reassess where we are. Let's delve back into our candidate pool, and let's put Ryan Passari as the interim while we're doing it, obviously, we lose the previous interim. He has to take a job elsewhere. Um, the what gets me, and this is where I kind of, to be honest with you guys out there, it's the off season, it's summer, and I'm doing a million things, and I haven't delved deep enough into it. But what gets me is there's all this smoke regarding Brian Lafemina.
Uh-huh.
There's all this goodwill, for lack of a better term, good vibes around the Rutgers fan base about him, about how, they're going with an alumni. He has this quasi sports business background. It's a different direction than we've gone in the past. It's going to work. And then you get the reporting by NJ.com saying that, we swung and missed on a primary candidate and he's withdrawn his name. Now, you know how the news is. And being somebody who sometimes is involved in things that get reported in the news and then knowing the back end and then seeing what
Right.
the front end, that things get lost in translation. I guess my only, you know, cautionary tale in terms of taking this story at face value, in terms of we swung and missed, that implies that we were close to hiring and offering him and he ducked out and said, you know what, no thanks. Perhaps there's the caveat that because there was going to be new considerations and, new parameters to a contract or to his duties or whatever, maybe he backed out because he's like, I don't want to sit around for this anymore. You took forever to hire a president. Now you're throwing new terms at me, new situation.
Right.
I'm good where I am. However, I believe it was reported in NJ.com by Steve Politi that an offer was made and that he knew that from sources and I guess ultimately rejected. So I to answer your question, I think when you get a new president, there's no way he's not somehow involved in the process. Like we know that just goes without saying. I think it's basic logic. I don't necessarily think that with him coming in, he's taken like over the search or commandeered the vetting consultancy group and he's making all the decisions. I think the same players are making the decisions and driving the bus. He's obviously going to have a seat at the table, but I'm genuinely interested and intrigued by what could have transpired here. Was this a simple case of, hey, Rutgers, it's a hornet's nest, don't want to go in there, happy with my life, don't need all the scrutiny, don't need all the publicity, I'm good? Or is there more to it in terms of the inner workings and what kind of deal was offered, what kind of stipulations were attached to it, what kind of politics are involved? I'm curious because that really will go a long way to determining what the final outcome is for Rutgers. I think any way you slice this, it's a bad look. Now, whether ultimately
Right.
and ultimately it was fine and this was all for legitimate reasons, it's a bad look publicly facing. It just doesn't look, it looks like something's wrong and Rutgers can't get their shit together.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, the one thing that I'll add that, and maybe somebody mentioned this in another podcast, and I don't live in New Jersey, right? I don't think I'll ever live there again. But I get the pull of people who uh, feel like they're at a point in their career and they want to go back, right? Like this is someone who is around the sports program from what we understand, who I'm sure has donated some money, who don't know how much, right? Who would be making a major life decision, probably leaving some money on the table to take the job. But it's not all about money. Now, we don't know what exactly that figure is. Maybe it's like not even close. I'm not sure. But the point I just want to make about it is when Rutgers has kind of gone back to like previous, like loyal sons and daughters of Rutgers, like take the Eddie Jordan example. Eddie Jordan was kind of like on the outs in the NBA, and that was probably the best job he could get, and the only reason he even got it was because of some of his track record. If you look at, for example, Tim Pernetti, it was more of he was ascending when he got his role as the athletic director, but I don't know if a place that he didn't have ties to would have hired him to be the athletic. Like I don't think Boston College or West Virginia would have hired him for the same position. But because he had the history at Rutgers, he was able to use it to move forward. This seems like neither of those two scenarios. And so I can understand why La Femina wouldn't take it unless the terms were not necessarily favorable, but at least neutral to a situation. to then come back. So again, I don't have any behind the scenes information, but I just want to talk about that element because it did seem like it would have been a home run hire for a number of those reasons. He's familiar with Rutgers historically, right? So, like we talk about, we've been fans since before the current administration. So he has ties that predate us entirely, right? So that's good. But he's also around the program now, so it's not like he's out of touch with it, and you're just kind of like Eddie Jordan style in that sense, just like teleporting back in and being like, okay, this is not the same. But it also had the other part being that this is someone with the business experience, and we know Rutgers has struggled with a more traditional, like athletic program with their competitors for years, going outside the box and zagging rather than zigging and going with more of a business hire with experience, even as something as complex as like the Los Angeles 2028 Olympics seemed like a logical way of trying to kind of take a different approach, but with someone who knows Rutgers. And then at least you get one person in place that touches all those boxes, which gives you a lot more flexibility if you want to then hire a more traditional athletic director from a lower level to be more focused on that. Now, again, maybe the hierarchy is the problem. Who knows, right? But that checks a lot of your boxes, so you can feel more comfortable. If you hire someone, and like one of the problems with the Chris Ash hire was he had no ties to the area. But if he
Right.
was hypothetically like a really, really good high rising coach, you would feel more okay if you had someone else kind of checking those other boxes. So this kind of complicates that because now do you just take an athletic director in a traditional role from a lower level without this kind of fall of the kind of business background, or do you now stay the course and try to say, okay, let's try to find someone else with a business background who's no way we're going to find somebody who met all the same criteria? I guess that's kind of where I would bring it back to you. Have you heard anything, or do you think maybe that the reporting structure or kind of dynamics of who does what, did you hear anything that that might be a problem? Because obviously that's the entire tie into the future of college athletics, and this mini series of podcasts is like, where are we going?
Yeah, I haven't heard that, one way or the other what the cause was. I know that in the same article that discussed that we swung and missed, that there was, it was reported by NJ.com that we had previously interviewed Mike Polisi, currently the president of sports marketing firm Van Wagner's college division. He's a longtime sports executive, business executive. Started his career as the associate director of the Scarlet Art Club at Rutgers in 1986. 14 years as an executive at a different company, a New Jersey-based sports, sponsorship company. Throughout his tenure, he's a Point Pleasant Beach native. I mean, I guess, you know, I have some nuanced feelings on the overall thing. You take those candidates together.
Yeah.
And I know that we all discussed that the AD should potentially have a sports business background for the new era. And I know that narratives and collective thoughts kind of start to get a life of their own sometimes. And we're all just like blinders on, and it seems like Rutgers is now. I don't know. That's what you need. But when I say sports executive, I know that TV contracts and NIL are a big part of college football right now and basketball. But there's still another element to it. And I guess when I say sports executive, I'm thinking of pro league executives, pro team executives. And I'm thinking less of like guys coming at it just like the sports business world on the
Right.
other end, like sponsorships or agencies or whatever. Now, you may know how to manage personalities, to solicit bids, to work, handlers and agents and construct a roster in terms of, marketing the program or marketing to get guys on board. But, you look at our basketball program last season and the marketing and the attraction of talent, I mean, wasn't the issue. I get that there's a
Right.
lot of discussion as to whether we had unlimited NIL funds sufficient to surround the guys with the right talent, but that's still just one prong of it. You're raising money, and I'm wondering if, and I'm not casting aspersions on any of these candidates. I don't know the ins and outs of their experience. I don't know the ins and outs of what's going on with Rutgers. I don't know the ins and outs of what the job description is internally and what those interviews and discussions are. But if they're just kind of generally vaguely saying, well, we need somebody who understands like these kids and this money, and not saying like, here's our specific plan, a guy who's managed rosters, managed, salary distributions, managed, agreements with marketing and like everything I think ties into this, not just a big sports personality who's in that business world because, oh, it's business now. Let's just go all out business. I'm not casting aspersions. I don't know. I'm not the guy in charge, and for good reason. But I just hope that the candidate has enough experience and understanding of both sides. And I don't know if some of these guys look at the structure and say, well, I'm in the sports marketing or agency or, sports businesses, Dave, derivatives from sports
Sure,
rather
sure,
than
sure.
the actual sport. And maybe, I don't know, looking at the power structure of a major university, the political issues, the actual nuts and bolts sports program building, Olympic sports, all these other things. You're managing lacrosse too and women's, so it's like, I don't know if that is part of the issue. I don't know if Tate comes in and says, "Oh, hold up. We got to reconsider some of these things here. You guys I don't know, but I just hope that in the end it's the right mix of business acumen, but sports business. And sports business is not just the derivatives of the sport. It's the literal business of the sport, like
Right.
merchandising, player contracts. I mean, that's professional sport. What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah. I mean, I just think the role is too big for one person to do in any way.
Mm,
And that's why I think it really would make sense. I mean, you look at Rutgers even early in Hobbs's tenure when he had Sarah Baumgartner in there, right? And they seem to have this divide and conquer structure functioning pretty well. Now, again, we don't know if there was other smoke behind the scenes. We don't really know. But like she didn't leave for like a worse job. She left for a better job. It made total sense as to why this person would be leaving to take a step up in their career. Like it seemed like that made sense. And so, yeah, I mean, I think it's important that somebody there clearly can understand, especially on the heels of the Hobbs situation. I think it's important that somebody can understand the life of the student athlete, right? Because clearly the Hobbs scandal showed us that nobody was advocating for those gymnasts who were
right.
getting screwed over by this whole situation, right? And they weren't necessarily getting like physically abused like we've seen at like Michigan State or in other places. It wasn't even like that. But it's like, hey, I'm trying to go to class, and yet now you're telling me I can't be on the team from some made up injury. So now I gotta forget my class. I got to go to some specialist doctor to get a second opinion because you're not taking care of me all while I'm dealing this, and I'm supposed to be a student, right? That's my number one job, and you're giving me all this sort of stuff, which is ridiculous, right? So I'm not saying that you need everyone in the athletic department to be able to understand and put themselves in the role of that athlete, but Rutgers, kind of like usual, we talk about an overcorrection. They're kind of in a bad spot where they might need to overcorrect partially for public perception, but also partially for internal perception that, hey, there's somebody there who's actually going to listen to us. Because, yeah, I mean, sure, you can pay people more, money Rutgers doesn't have, but they can't, on an equal playing field when it comes to money, they can't beat out some of these other opportunities that these
Right.
athletes are going to have. And so you got to be not missing that in action. Never mind missing a leader entirely. So, in my opinion, I think it's too big for one person. That's a short answer to your question. In terms of professional sports, yes, I think it's important somebody who has had a prominent role in a professional sports organization, ideally in the U.S. But if you find me some Rutgers alum who's in the Italian soccer league, I'd be like, okay, I'm fine with that too, right? Like I'm not necessarily listening to it that way, but I do think it's important because, like you keep pointing out, wherever we are now is not where we're going to be in 3 to 4 years. And where we're going more often than not is going to be more similar to a professional sports model. And so I made a point to you before we got on here about how in the National Football League, for example, players don't sign a contract with the team. They don't sign a contract with the Pittsburgh Steelers or the Chicago Bears. They sign a contract with the league. And so whether you like it or not, if the Big Ten and SEC decide either, hey, Big Ten, we're our own entity, or Big Ten plus SEC, we're our own entity, or even the Power Four decide, and maybe five in basketball, maybe you have the Big East in there as well, whatever it is. If they decide they're doing that, do you have confidence that Rutgers is going to be able to immediately hire someone who's an expert in this type of litigation and contract structuring? No, they're going to take a year to find somebody who is in this particular area of expertise, and they're going to fall behind again. And that's why you got to get ahead of like where this stuff is going, or at least someone who has some knowledge that we're not quite at that spot yet with this college athletics, or else you're going to constantly be in reactive mode and fall further and further and further behind with every one of these things. Like, for example, you made the point about the TV revenue. That's not necessarily, I'm not worried that Rutgers needs to be involved like in the
Right.
TV revenue generation of the Big Ten. Like that, it's a big enough conference that everyone can take a piece of that pie. But when it comes to battling other Big Ten teams for athletes under a new contract structure, or if we go to multi-year contracts, which we mentioned on our previous episode, same thing. Like, come on, we need somebody who has this type of experience so that other people aren't chat GPTing like what they need to do. And I'm not, again, we're not criticizing an individual person, but the whole point is you got to be having people with skills that they're not even leveraging yet in the event that they're going to have to leverage them in the future. And that's kind of where I see both sides. Like, I think it's important. And if you had one person who could do all this, great. But that used to be like when I worked for Oracle and people would say, hey, I want someone who's a lawyer and a CPA. And I'm like, and you want to pay $100 an hour for this person?
Right.
It doesn't exist,
Right.
right? So, like, that's where I kind of view it as, yeah, if you can get somebody who can do all of this, great. But even then, they probably aren't going to have the time. And again, I'm not married to a particular structure. Like I mentioned in a previous episode, certain teams in the NFL, the GM and the coach both report to the owner. Some of them, the coach reports to the GM. I don't know in this particular situation if Rutgers has like a head of athletics and then on the field and then another head of business, who's in charge of who, or whatever. I don't care how it works. I don't think that there's a one size fits all, but they do need people with all of these two sides of expertise. And in all likelihood, you're going to have to get two different people, or else you're going to be trying to pay for someone who can probably make double or triple in the private sector, which would have those sort of skills. So that's my general take on. I guess my single question back to you is: can one person even do this? Or do you think it has to be multiple people, or maybe one person can then hire a tree of people that might also be able to pull it off?
And that's what I'm curious about, right? Like and I'm curious, and that's why I said I wasn't privy to the interview questions or the structure of the conversations, because it's like, are these people folks who, because they're so ingrained in just an innovative business industry related to sports, have their thumb on the pulse of where things are going, and regardless of their experience thus far, have a good handle on, look, this is where things are going. This is my vision. This is how I'm going to integrate it with college sports. This is who I'm going to hire to manage the contracts. This is who I'm going to bring in to fundraise. This is how I envision it. Is that part of the conversation? And are some of these candidates, able to go into an interview and discuss the trajectory of college athletics overall? I think I completely agree with you. In the new frontier of college sports, it's not just managing several different athletics programs as they pertain to student athletes, and then handling some sort of conference collective, Big Ten, Big East, whatever, and TV deals and whatever. It's much larger than that now. There's a paid component to athletes. There's distribution of shared monies to different programs.
Right.
There's management of all of that. It's much bigger. So I do think, regardless of who comes in, you're going to have to come in with a team. So maybe interviewing these people with these deep, long-standing connections with the sports business world avails them to more candidates. Maybe one of the first hires somebody makes, like a Polisi or whoever, is they bring in maybe an assistant AD from a school as part of their team. So now you have that institutional academic knowledge as part of the student athlete thing there, but you also have this larger business structure. And maybe he brings in next like somebody who was working in a front office in a pro league somewhere,
Right,
and
right.
now he's got his team and he's the mastermind, who's the innovator, who's the entrepreneurial spirit. That could be part of the equation. I hope that's where it goes. Now, time will tell. We don't know. Insofar as the, which I'm surprised, it's interesting. It makes a lot of sense that you would sign with a league and then there's specific provisions and addendum for a team. That's where the antitrust thing comes in. And I think that's
Right.
a lot of what's going on with college sports now is now there's this settlement talk where all these major leagues are saying, well, there's a settlement in the lawsuit. We're going to figure out a way to make this more orderly. There's going to be a clearinghouse for NIL deals. There's going to be other regulations that come into play and roster regulations and restrictions. And some of the rumors early on were, some people aren't going to stand for this. They're simply going to file another antitrust lawsuit and it's going to fall apart again. And some are saying, well, they've tamped that down because they're coming to an agreement. But sadly, it seems as though, settlement or not, this antitrust button, this nuclear option, will always exist for somebody who doesn't. I don't know. I am an attorney and I do familiarize myself with this as best I can. I can't pretend to sit here, unlike a lot of commentators on a lot of things these days, and pretend I know all the ins and outs and give you some definitive answer that I know everything about this. Based on the cursory knowledge I have, and if people are interested in hearing me delve into this deeper, let me know, and I will do more research and read more about this and read the cases and the litigation procedural history and give you more of a detailed explanation. But from my understanding, the reason the NFL is even able to do that is because they have the antitrust exemption. So you can basically fix things amongst
Right.
member teams. You can sign with the league and you're prevented from going elsewhere unless these conditions are met. I can block you from going elsewhere. All these other things that we don't have yet. Now, does Congress step in and provide for some sort of exemption for conferences or a super conference collective or something? Those things are probably all in discussion behind the scenes. I think would benefit the fan experience, the players, the school, maybe not the players as much as the other ones, but it's been a one-sided deal here now for a couple of years. Maybe you need to bring that in. All that to say, there's a lot of moving parts, and to your point, and I think it was particularly piqued my interest when you said, people want a CPA/attorney and they want to keep the same price. You need a CPA, a general manager, an attorney, a
Right.
fundraiser. And I think some of the thing with Hobbs that went wrong was he was from academia in the sense he was an interim AD at Seton Hall. He was completely, and I hear what you're saying, and I just hope they don't overcorrect without
Exactly.
acknowledging what we just said. We got to go all out fundraising and business because yes, Hobbs was bad enough with the affair, but what about the complete lack of attention to NIL funds and the apprehension he had frozen in place from even starting down that path, which set us back. I hope they don't overcorrect and just go totally, hey, money manager, making money for kids all day, like without the legal angle, the management angle, the academic understanding, all those things come into play. And it's just an ever evolving right now. To answer your another question, and I'd like to hear your take, and this is quasi embracing the future of college athletics part 3, but we've talked so much about it, and now this is clear and present for Rutgers. But I don't believe that this rapid upheaval will continue in perpetuity. I don't believe that we will
Right.
always be in flux. I think we're going to settle into something within a decade or so, maybe less, hopefully less, where we do have a new frontier, but the frontier is conquered and it may look totally different than now, but it's steady. And I just hope we're picking the person, because those, ships and wagons west, they pick up a lot of tough things along the Oregon Trail, and some make it and become rich and strike gold, and some die on the way. And I'm just hoping that we're picking the right captain to lead us into this new frontier so that we're one of the teams that land on our feet. And that might not mean the same thing as it used to, like conference affiliation or whatever. It might just mean having the right people in place to run the business of sports in that new era and do it efficiently and in a way that helps you win games and continue to market yourself. I don't know, but we are in a pivotal situation, and I find it hard to glean much more beyond our speculation other than the names that have been reported. And I just hope that they're assembling a team like you're saying and not just going all out on one aspect, ignoring the other 3 or 4.
Yeah, I mean, that said, then you have this trade-off of time versus making the right hire. I do agree that normally, like for example, Belichick would say in football, you can never be mad about the players you didn't draft. You can only be mad if you draft one that doesn't work out, right? But that's operating under parameters that the draft happens once a year. There's stable rules in place. There's a structure in place. This is not that. This is not that at all. Right now, I mean, and this is where perhaps, for someone like Aaron who's saying every day that goes by you fall behind, there is a balancing act there, right? Because
I agree.
let's take an example. Anyone who's working in an organization knows the difference if you have leaders or not. And I'm not saying Matt Colagiovanni is not doing it, but remember, he's doing 2 jobs. He's doing his job and another job, so he can't clearly do both of them at the same level. Even if he is the best facilities person in the country, you're asking him to do a job of 2 people that clearly we've established over the last 100 years cannot be done, or else other people would do it, right? So my concern is like, let's take an example. We talked about the Caleb McConnell car dealership thing, right? If you have every sport operating at their own incentive structure, right? Football's doing what's best for them, soccer's doing what's best for them, baseball, whatever. Let's say Steve Peichel goes back to that car dealership and says, "Hey, would you like to have I don't know, like Manuel Ogbole advertise your car dealership because I don't know, he's huge. Maybe we do a picture of him lifting up a car or something. I don't know, whatever. I'm just using him as an
Yeah,
example for the
yeah.
novelty of it, right? But the car dealership is like, okay, well, I would like a Rutgers athlete. Puts the phone down, calls up Greg Schiano. Hey, do you have anyone who would be interested in advertising for my car dealership? I pay,
Mhm.
$400 instead of 500 that Peikel's asking for because that's what we did last time. Okay, hangs up the phone, calls up Coquise Washington. Hey, do you have anyone on the team who'd like? And you're literally working against yourself as an athletic department in terms of enabling your student athletes. Whereas if you had an athletic director in place now, again, I'm not saying Cola Giovanni couldn't do that, but he's already tied up, right?
Yes.
And it's like, what are we doing, people? Like, come on. And
Yes.
again, I understand that there can be too many levels of bureaucracy. I've worked in businesses where there was 3 levels up to CEO, and then 2 years passed, now there's 8, and now I can't get my job done. Like, I understand there's 2 sides, right? Just like we talk about allocation of funds. No one would say, well, maybe someone would say, and football should advocate to say, hey, we should get all of that money because we're the most revenue generating sport. On the flip side, it wouldn't make any sense to say, well, we all should divide it up perfectly equal between all the sports because football gets more money and basketball generates more money, whereas other sports are net negatives, right? So, but the answer lies somewhere in that continuum. And
Yes.
I'm not on this podcast to tell you where exactly I think that needs to be because you need somebody who has all the information to come up with it, right? Because if a sport like football or basketball has more resources, they have more public persona, they can generate even more revenue, which can feed back into the pipeline, right? So there's all kinds of these sorts of decisions that you need a leader to be taking ownership of. And that's where I guess again, somewhere on the continuum, there's making the right hire, but there's also, let's say we wait another year, there's no way that you can make up for all that lost decision making and money that you didn't get for that year. It's just impossible to make up for that. Like I said earlier when we were talking about it, I don't think that people will say, "Well, I didn't donate 10,000 last year, so I'll just add that to my thing this year." No one does that, right?
Yeah.
That money's
Of course
gone.
not
I'm
happening.
if I'm trying to get a tax exemption, I'm giving it to somebody else. I'm giving it to Feeding America or something,
Right.
right? Like whatever it is.
Yes.
And so that's my concern with the whole thing is that like yes, think you need someone who can understand the life of an athlete. You need someone who's hardcore in business. You don't want them to be doing the same job, just like it makes more sense for a house to have 2 parents, right? Because one of
Yes.
them's too lovey and one of them's the driver of the kid's success or whatever. However you want to break it down, like it doesn't matter. You still need these 2 balancing forces, and that's why again I can understand the structure, but if you want to go top down, if you want to have two people reporting, I don't know if that works, but you need all of these things. And you're right. A really good team builder will know, hey, I'm good at this, which means I need to find someone else who's good at this, that, or the other thing. And but that said, like I am very concerned that this is just going to keep rolling, because to kind of touch on something we haven't touched on today, but really my goal as a fan is I think the first simple goal is Rutgers needs to be the best program in New Jersey in every sport that they compete in.
Mm-hmm.
How do you get there? That's really what you're trying to do. And every day that goes by, Princeton and basketball, Seton Hall, who have beaten Rutgers lately, I mean, baseball, I mean, they I don't know, are they the best team in New Jersey right now? And I don't want to even have to ask that question. I mean,
Right.
2 years ago, 3 years ago, they absolutely were by
Yes.
far, without a doubt, the best baseball team in New Jersey. And so every day that goes by, you're potentially losing ground and negotiating against yourself. I know my car dealership example was very elementary, but the same thing should look at my household. Let's say my dad wants to donate to Rutgers baseball, my mom wants to donate to Rutgers gymnastics, right? A good athletic program would say, hey, let's all get together and do baseball right now because we're trying to build this new stadium. Then everyone get on board, get that across the line, move to the next thing. And that's where I'm really concerned about this, because I've seen even in professional cities, which are probably a better example, like Baltimore losing the Colts because they're being too scrutinizing of them. And then a decade later, Cleveland is like, okay, let's get this baseball stadium across the line. And then Art Modell's like, okay, now it's everyone's turn to help me because I helped everyone with the baseball. And then there's no money to be found. So he's like, F it, I'm moving to Baltimore. And you see this carousel. That is what's going to happen if we're not careful. And
Right.
that's a little bit of a rant about it. But like, again, I'm not saying anything about Cola Giovanni is negative. Like, but he's doing two jobs. Like, you need someone in this role right now that also has the authority to make long-term decisions. Because the other thing is, like with Pasari, he couldn't make any long-term decisions that we're going to invest in this project that's going to take 5 to 10 years, because he's not going to be there in 5 to 10 years. So now we're running into this issue. To your point, and I'll wrap it with this real quick, is like, yes, we don't have to. We know things are crazy right now, but we have to assume at some point in the next decade they will stabilize a little bit. So we can't just be thinking about the present. We do have to be thinking a little bit about the future, or we're going to find ourselves behind the 8 ball once again.
Well, yeah, and I think, that's where you can lose ground by not hiring somebody. You could lose ground by hiring the wrong person or
True.
hastily hiring, not on the same page as the president, or wasn't the best team builder, or took it begrudgingly because it felt some
Right.
sense of,
Right.
respect for the alma mater or the opportunity, and heart wasn't really in it. And then all of a sudden you start running one direction, which, you have to start from scratch again in 2 years because they're gone or it was the wrong direction. So
Right.
it's a delicate balance, as you put. It's a delicate balance, and I'm where I am right now on it is I'm disappointed by the fact that we don't have one in place. I'm more disappointed by the way it looks institutionally, publicly facing, that it's reported that we swung and missed, and that, we were, I'd rather hear, well, the new president came in, that was always priority number one. They always knew there was a possibility they might have to step back to, fully integrate the new president's perspective into the process, and therefore, hold your horses, rather than, oh, now we're putting another interim. We lost our past interim. We swung and missed for this guy. And then when I'm hearing the names and I'm not totally sure, I know most people are hyped, like we need the sports business, but that's a big umbrella. What aspect of sports business are we looking at? What I'm more worried about, as opposed to the time right now, is I just hope that the inner workings and mechanisms charged with making the right hire make the right hire. And if that takes a few more months, even though that's crazy because you're getting into football season, it's Rutgers. We've had big time screw ups in athletics over and over again. And if it
Yep.
takes a few more months for me to have several years of peace, or to properly build this thing and pioneer it, I'll gladly take that temporary pain and impatience, to sacrifice for good things down the road. But if we're going to be hasty and we're going to just continue to be a rudderless ship for the foreseeable future because we don't even have a plan, well, we all know that's a problem. And that's kind of my long short of it, on this whole topic. And any kind of final thoughts from you in terms of where you see this going, where you stand on your opinion of the current situation, and what you hope to see when we finally do make that hire.
No, I mean, I will, same things I said already, which is that I just think you got to make sure you have every aspect and some of the potential aspects accounted for. Yeah, maybe there never will be a situation where, and whether because of antitrust laws or not, that Big Ten and SEC, that they're like, you're signing a contract with them rather than, maybe not. But Rutgers too often plays this reactive game of like, well, that might not happen, so let's not worry about it. And yes, it's true. Like, just like if you're an entrepreneur, eventually there are plenty of situations will happen that you tried to plan for and it didn't work out. But then there's plenty that do, and you're going to look like a fool.
Yes.
And I guess my biggest frustration with the whole thing is, sure, New Jersey is relatively decreasing in population compared to other states, right? But it's still like a top 15 state in terms of population, maybe down from ninth or whatever it was, maybe when we were born or so. But like, there are enough people from New Jersey that, like, we think about all the names we found of coaches who have New Jersey ties. I'm sure it's very similar with the athletic director, that you can find somebody, whether it's Northern Illinois or another like group of 5 team who's ready to take that next step, if they wanted to, that would have New Jersey ties. And then again, you're checking some of the boxes to make it easier to fill in that team with all those skills, right? That there's just still enough New Jerseyans out there that hopefully have more of a desire than me to move back. But I mean, my other frustration is I'm not a New Jersey taxpayer, right? But you have to be saying to yourself, whether you agree with something like Doge or whatever, the federal government or whatever, not, it doesn't matter. The point is, you're like, if I'm a taxpayer, what the F did my tax dollars go to for this search firm? Like, what
Right.
the heck?
Right.
Right? Like, even if you're not a donor and you're just the average person who, works a regular job, like, you're like, I'm paying for this? What are we doing here? And
Yes.
so that's equally frustrating, again, like, for the whole thing. And that's what would just drive me up a wall if that was happening. And again, I'm not funding this because I don't live there now, but my whole family does, right? And they are. And I just think you got to come up with something. The only one thing that opens up another can of worms, I have a friend who's the founder of Fan Fund U, which is basically like Rakuten but for colleges to raise NIL funds. And they have set this up at a couple of schools, and I haven't really talked about it in a lot of the podcasts because I'm not trying to just replace sponsorship, right? But
Mhm.
the point being is that he talks to pretty much every athletic director at all of these major schools. And he's actually had an athletic director say, who was at a group or a Power Four school, that he wishes he was just an athletic director at a Group of 5 school, because the politics involved of getting anything done and the power and the money involved and who's got it and the Power Four is so much higher than the Group of 5 that he's like, I would rather, this is again an active athletic director at one of these programs saying that. So I guess my last thing, as I know we've taken a lot of time here, would be back to you, is like, how concerned are you that of Power 5 jobs, does that make Rutgers, based on what the anecdote I just told you, do you think that makes Rutgers more desirable or less desirable? Because it's smaller than something like Alabama. So again, this isn't Alabama, it's not the AD I'm talking about, but there are things that make it more attractive because you got less money and less big donors and like than Texas, for example, who always runs into this problem. But at the same time, there's also more bureaucracy than like Ryan Passari is walking into going into Tufts. So
Yeah.
are you majorly concerned that no one's going to want this job, a la what we heard about Chris Ash getting hired as the football coach? Or do you think that's just completely overblown, like to buy time and, obscure what's actually happening?
No, I'm definitely worried about that. And I because a smaller budget and all that's great if you're in a smaller pool. If I'm in the kiddie pool or I'm in, a local lake and I got a pontoon boat or a rowboat or a kayak, good. I don't have to worry about the sail and navigating it or a big
Right.
engine or a crew or any of it. Fine. But if I'm in the treacherous North Sea and I have that same boat, like I sure as hell want something big. So I think the problem with Rutgers is, yeah, smaller budget, smaller this, smaller that, but you're in the big pond. So you feel like you've got to navigate these waters with at least one hand tied behind your back. And what I would say is, I'm definitely worried about a situation where if you have a lot of options, and why would you pick Rutgers? Whereas if you are an up and comer or somebody outside the box, or you just have an affinity for New Jersey or something, well, then that could make sense because now Rutgers is going to offer you a substantial raise or a substantial prestige or et cetera
Right.
that you're not going to get elsewhere. But if you've got options between Rutgers and like two or three other Power Four schools, if Rutgers is going to be a hornet's nest of politics and media scrutiny and past scandal, and you're not going to have access to the same level of donor base or financing or even deference in terms of athletics, it could be a big turnoff, especially if you don't have an affinity for Rutgers or New Jersey, or you don't know how to navigate it, and it's not a substantial raise for you. So I am worried about that, and I think if people aren't, I think it might be a little bit of wishful thinking. It doesn't mean we can't get the right hire. It doesn't mean we won't get the right hire. It also doesn't mean that Rutgers can't just outbid other schools and just pay better. Has that been their track record? Absolutely not. But you can't count it out. But I'm definitely worried about that situation 100%. And I think anybody coming in has to have a plan to tackle it.
Yeah. But yeah, we didn't even get to talk about what we were wanted to, the whole purpose of this. But the future of college athletics, I guess, is just on full display with this athletic director search, which is kind of how we got on this, 45-minute tangent, because
Yes.
it really does touch on a lot of the things that we've already talked about. And we can't even talk about, like, should football just double down to be a running team, or basketball be a 2-3 zone team, because they don't even know what their revenue share is going to be. And right now they're just operating somewhat on their own incentive structure compared to some of the other sports.
Yeah, and I think this will all become clear, and you and I will be able to talk about it when it does become clear in the near future. Our hires, what kind of team they put together, what other positions are out there, and what college football, college basketball, college sports, and Rutgers looks like in the near future. So you guys should tune back into us for any major developments or anything that occurs. We will be discussing it, even if not breaking news with the scroll endlessly underneath here. We will get to it the next time you hear from us. So make sure you're tuning in on
Hey,
YouTube.
one
Make
one
sure,
last thing,
yeah,
Larry. We should congratulate Chris Gutter up for his third place finish at the British Open.
yes, congrats, sir.
And I have to say, I have a bone to pick with ESPN because they listed him as an Oklahoma alumnus.
I heard about this.
I'm
Yes, and as much as he reps RU too, it was a
I
little bit
know.
of it was disappointing that they do that, and that's the constant slights of Rutgers. But make sure you guys in that Rutgers spirit subscribe to this channel. Continue to follow all the other content creators. Make sure you catch Dave over with Aaron Brightman. And where else, sir, can they find you?
I'm at Off Tackle Empire, and then I'm also probably going to be on one of the Iowa podcasts tomorrow. That, if I just double check the name of which one it is, it's the Play the Fight Song podcast.
Nice.
So I might be on there as well this week.
Nice. So catch him over there. Support the Iowa podcast. Support Mr. Anderson going abroad and carrying the scarlet colors into battle and friendly banter with fellow Big Ten teams. And stay tuned for the next one. We have some stuff in the works for you guys, so we will continue to be at it. Dog days of summer continue to fight on, but training camp is on the horizon. So keep it locked here and everywhere else that covers Rutgers for your Rutgers fix. We'll talk to you guys later.